of all, welcome to everyone. Welcome to the symposium in memory of Trevor James, a truly remarkable Hertfordshire naturalist. And it's really great to see Chris here today, along with so many of Trevor's friends. We've got a really, hopefully, packed agenda which will both do justice to the range of achievements of Trevor, but also hopefully stimulate some thoughts for the future. Certainly, I view Trevor for, and know him as well as many of you who work alongside Trevor, probably 10 years or so, and very long memories, and certainly he was always personally very encouraging and supportive, always willing to share knowledge and experience, and that was certainly for me something I always valued. We're starting off today with some personal reflections from a number of Trevor's friends and colleagues, speakers, before we then move through to looking at Trevor's contribution to developing biological recording in the UK, and then with Ian Denholm talking about the floor of Hertfordshire and the work, Trevor's work with Ian and others on that, before then hearing from Stuart about his work with beetles, and then Ken, Ken and Linda or Ken? Ken, on his work on big birds, before we then wrap up with a bit of an open panel discussion, hopefully a two-way discussion about what we can do our best to secure Trevor's legacy. I'm not quite sure whether we've done this in chronological order, but we thought we'd start with John with some personal reflections from childhood memories, I think. Yeah. John.
Yeah. Can you hear me at the back? Yes, very good. Well, yes, my reading was Trevor James, the early years. Yes, I first came across Trevor when my family moved up to Bidwell Company Hill, where a few doors away from my grandparents who lived there for several years before the war. And I was sent down to Cuffley Primary School. I think I was 7 or 8 years old, and I was seated. In those days, I assumed in alphabetical, but there was nobody with a surname beginning with K, so I was next to James, which was happily James Trevor. And being a new boy, you know, when you go to a new school, you get your profile lower to suss it all out. And I soon realised that Trevor was a very clever lad. He seems to be top of the class. And my weakness, and still is, I cannot spell. I used to, when I was in medical practice, I used to put on bad writing and those things. And so Trevor, I said, look, if you move it over a bit, he let me copy his spellings, and that cemented our relationship. And then we got talking about, natural history. He was obviously very keen on birds, but to be truthful, I wouldn't like to admit it, because birds nesting and egg collecting. And we chatted about that, and we also bonded over that thing that seemed to have evaporated from all primary school, was the nature table. And Trevor and I were prime competitors to produce lots of things that we picked up and found, place on the nature table and get praise from the teachers. Anyway, so we went on to primary school. We both passed our 11 plus. He went to Hertford, I went to Cheshire. And, again, taking into new schools, I didn't, we lost touch a little bit. And then I think possibly it was always to be summer when we were young anyway. But I can remember we met again outside the sweet shop in Cuffley, which was always a big magnet for small boys with pocket money. And we chatted again, and we realised, how we were going to burn this thing here. We also collected stamps, coins, books, we were all of that ilk. And so, he was got my house, and we started a regular tour, starting on the Ridgeway, going around Cuffley to Norfolk, bird watching. And Trevor, I think the key was he got a copy of the London Bird Report, which he, I remember it was red, so I don't know what year, it was the 50s. And he thought, this bird report, I think we, i.e. he, ought to start a bird report for Cuffley and Norfolk. And there was a couple of other lads who came from the primary school, and we gathered together, and Trevor organised us all to go bird watching, produce records, have notebooks. I remember we put my system on, we wrote everything down. He always underlined the birds, and he encouraged us to put comments down about weather and other bits and pieces that he found. I still underline every bird I've seen, I know, which is inherited from Trevor. Anyway, so he also thought we ought to have a rarities committee. And that caught me off the heritage committee for life. I remember we had 5 Kirby sandpipers at North on Arses, and there was a furious argument between those who had seen it, which wasn't Trevor and I, and those that had seen it. And it didn't quite cause schism within the group, but anyway, Heritage Committee are dangerous things anyway. I know that very early when I was about 14 or 13 at the time. Anyway, so, and the other thing, Trevor decided we ought to send the records in, and that's how Brian Sage emerged onto the scene. Because he obviously, I think Brian was the bird recorder in Hertfordshire at the time. And I don't know whether he didn't believe what these records, because things like 12 red stars, 7 things in the great one, 7 anyway, and so eventually wood warblers, it was the wood warblers, Trevor found the wood warblers best in the great one. And Brian wanted to came over just to verify this, because I think it was a bit suspicious anyway. So that started the connection with Brian, and Brian persuaded Trevor that he wanted to go to the Naturalist Association, and I sort of followed suit and joined, and we used to meet up with Brian, his building mix, and his takes all over to the meetings. Now, I have here, which people can have a look at, these are the bird report for Cuffley and Norfolk. Actually, there were 4 of them. I lost number 1, which was, I'm a bit chaotic in my sort of finding system. And I don't know where happened number 1, but I've got number 2, 3 and 4. The first 2 or 3 were all handwritten, bound by Trevor. And the last one was, we got an old typewriter. It was either from the Top Age Jumble Sale or the Scouts Jumble Sale in Cuffley. So that was the type one. And these were, I don't know how many he produced. Each of our group had one, and I think he sent some to Brian and other people. So these are interesting. And if you just look inside, for a chap, I don't know how old he was, he must have been, 15, 16, something at the most. All about the habitat. They're marvellous things, really. So I'll leave it there. Now, that's really Trevor and birds. Botany, Trevor had always had a sort of broad mind for natural history than me. We all knew a bit about botany, and all of a sudden we used to have a routine on a Saturday morning. We go around, starting at the Dell in this way, go around Norfolk. And he said, well, today, he said, we've got the chap coming along. I've invited him along, who's a bit of an expert on plants. We turned up on the Ridgeway, and it was a chap called Dr. John Daly, and his wife. I think he must have been in the early 60s. It must have been dark for it. Anyway, he set off. There was anybody out organising the job, Daly, but it was a dazzling moment for me. He started off down the Dell, and he was yelling out Latin names all the time. His wife was following 3 paces behind, furiously jumping down. And I thought, this is what naturalist wives do, very useful, and I've never actually found another person like that. Anyway, we went round. Trevor was trying to interact with him. I probably got a count of birds walking around, and somewhere at the back of Norfolk, John Daly suddenly got very excited to do a patch of green stuff there, and it was obviously a good top, for his botanical terms. And so he and Trevor got very excited about that. I could see Trevor getting really sort of up and I heard the word Dyer's greenweed. It looked like a weed to me, but I thought, and I could see it, and that, to me, that was a sort of dancing moment when botany suddenly gripped Trevor, and thereafter we went round the ponds. He took a much more interest in plants, and naturally I sort of hang on to his coattails as usual. I can bluff my way in botany a bit now. So that's how I think Trevor got into botany. Beetles, well, that was obviously Brian's age, because whenever we used to go out to the British Naturalist meetings, we've got a bit of birds. Brian would suddenly start peeling bark off dead trees, lifting up stones, and chasing the little beetles, put them in bottles. So, I used to join in, and Trevor obviously got between rock and bone. And I later in my natural history career, I did actually think I ought, basically send things to Trevor to identify. I thought I'd get into the beetles, try and get into the beetles. But I thought the book Fry and a couple of other things that Trevor recommended indeed. And I started, and when it came to having to examine the genitalia of beetles through a microscope, I thought this is a step too far, so I backed off on the beetle thing, and I gave my beetle box to Trey. So that's how I think I've got the beetles. And I think these things about connections with Brian and Dr. Daly, I don't know how I got on with him, but it was an early pointer to demonstrate networking skills within the natural history world. I went off to medical school and came back. He was always in the remove, apparently, so he finished his university career. By the time I managed to gather enough A-levels and things to get off to medical school. And so as I came, finished, as he finished, I went off. But we kept up correspondence in those days. And funny enough, he kept all my correspondence that I sent from medical school. And Chris gave me the letters. It was interesting. They were much more interesting reading than the ones I sent home. I said it's all about birds in every sense of the word, really. Beer drinking and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, and I came back home and I was in a bit of a state because I had a sort of a relationship breakup, and I was a bit fragile, and I worked at Birmingham City in the casualty department, and I used to Trevor was working at the museum in Hertfordshire, and he, after I'd come off shift or when I was off duty, I used to go over to the museum, and he used to give me a pot of some noxious fluid that smelled like petrol and a paintbrush, and I was put into the stuffed birds department and told to paint them. I'm not quite sure whether I was supposed to be cleaning them, but I think it was a mixture of cleaning and phenamide protection. Anyway, at lunchtime we used to go out and have lunch, but usually afterwards he'd arrange a meeting to go somewhere, a field study or to do something out and walk out. Often to walk ahead, which ended up pulling out bits of trees out of the grass. And after that, the next sort of 20, 30 years, we corresponded and we visited each other, and he came up, and I became sort of more interested in the conservation thing. I look after wildlife sites, and I got my own little nature reserves in Norfolk. And he was a great friend and a great support, and certainly when he was last illness, I tried to support him as best I could. He supported me when I was going through difficult times, as well as the natural history. And he was a very great friend to me, and I have this with him. Anyway, that's the early years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. That was fascinating to pick up, actually understand where Trevor came from, but also it really picks up actually that point about engaging with inspiring naturalists can have such an effect on young people's lives. And that's something I think Trevor took away himself in such years to so much. So thank you, very good. I think next with June Crew to, in fact, just with June knew Trevor for many years, and close friends, and I think you're going to recite a poem for us, June. I think you're reciting a poem for us.
Yes, okay. That was right. I'm warning you, can anybody hear me? Back row? Oh, good, thank you. Well, I'm about to, about to lower the tone of my voice. So, good morning, friends. To me, Trevor was modestly, totally awesome. I used to do an illustrated talk in praise of Hertfordshire's natural wonders. Of course, these included Jim Bob, my pet elephant caterpillar, who, after he painted and flew away, he even had his own Twitter account at the time. But Trevor, as a part of the orders of the natural wonders, to make the talk concise, I asked a friend, it's an illustrated talk I used to do, I asked a friend to turn my text into rhyming couplets. This is Trevor's. Trevor James, naturalist extraordinaire, ace of hearts, the ace of hearts. Our Mr. Nature, through and through, known so very well to all of you. There could be only one of him. For us, he was our lucky Jim, wise in the ways of all heart's flowers, but spare a thought for all those hours he spent just looking, taking note, while we all tried to learn by rote. He talked with knowledgeable aura, then went and wrote a stunning flora. Now, ordains gods inordinate in fondness for the people's state. He made them time and time again, so many, and defeating many lesser men, but not dear Trevor, who was up first, charting all those Coleoptera. He brought together countless parts to map the peoples across parts. He knew so much, always well versed. What he achieves, a stunning thirst. The debt we owes no small amount. He mattered in the ways that count. We miss our gentle, kindly guide, but celebrate his work with pride. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. Very impressive. Maybe it's your vocation in life. I certainly couldn't aspire to poetry of that quality. Thank you. David, I think you have some personal reflections to share on behalf of Michael Clark and Tom Gladwell.
Indeed. Michael Clark, sadly, I'm very disappointed not to be able to be here today. A long time friend of Trevor's from school, as well as growing up to become president of the Hertfordshire Natural History Society and an expert on battles and records and all sorts of exciting things. He wrote and he particularly based what he had to say around Trevor's memoir, which was published, well, literally in the last week of Trevor's life. And that's the title there. I'll take this opportunity to say that Chris has kindly bought some copies, the few remaining copies. If anybody would like one, donations please to the hospice that cared for Trevor. So there it is. Michael writes that just before he died, Trevor sent me a draft of his excellent account of his and Chris's life, Chance Encounters Following Nature's Lead. And that was published as an attractive book, as you can see, in 2020. I'd like to pick out some of the chance encounters with Trevor that I also recall with affection. Now I'm going to go on. Michael attended the same school as Trevor. He was a few years older. He became an enthusiastic bird watcher through identifying different species that came to a feeder outside his bedroom, this is Michael, and he was confined with whooping cough in his O-level years. Those were the days. Michael quotes the following from Trevor's memoirs. In May 1962, another lucky chance occurred. This is Trevor. I was looking for birds by the footpath below the dell with my head in a hedge, looking for a whitethroat's nest, when a figure with a dog appeared on the path. One of the dreaded prefects from Hertford Grammar School. He stopped and asked what I was looking for. I tried to explain. He was astonished by his enthusiasm. He was Michael Clark. And he too was keen on wildlife, and we spent the rest of the time wandering around together and talking. Well, Michael subsequently helped introduce Trevor to the Hertfordshire Natural Association and the legendary Brian Sage, as we've heard, and the matter of the wood warblers is also mentioned here, as those really were the days that Trevor found breeding in North Orwood. Michael Trevor also wrote about Michael, illustrating the cover of the first joint publishing venture with Brian Sage on the Great Wood. Watch that picture very carefully. There's a confession that follows. This is what Trevor wrote. He said, Michael Clark did some splendid drawings, not just for the mammals chapter, but also for the beetles, and above all, the tawny owl on the front cover. It was a first of its kind and attracted the press and television. Nobody, Michael wishes now to confess, seemed to notice that I had cut off the ears of a picture of a long-eared owl and used it in the design that also had battle and other footprints on the back cover. Tawny owl eyes, as I'm sure you all know, would be solid black, not like that. Michael, of course, also refers to the fact that Trevor was best man at his wedding to Anna on the 8th of July 1967, only 5 years after the meeting in Northwood. And he was rather apprehensive that in his best man speech, Trevor was going to mention this photograph, and that suggest that Michael had something of the smell of the polecat about him. However, apparently the speech at Totteridge Church was very generous indeed, said Michael. He also reminds us that Trevor dedicated his autobiography to Chris, and indeed to their son Edward, who's also here today. And he quotes another favourite paragraph from memoirs, which is this. In October 1979, Chris and I were married at Winchmore Hill United Reformed Church in North London, alongside many of the protagonists of the story so far. Brian and Audrey Sage, John and Pam Lyons, Michael and Anna Clark, Michael and Margaret Denedetsky, Jennifer Beeston, Jill and Mike Rose, and not to mention all our different relations and friends. A brief honeymoon followed in the Isles of Scilly, partly spent hunting rare North American birds, as it was just the right time of year. This in itself caused some fun, because the guest house failed to realise we were a newly married couple, thinking we were just a couple more birders, so they gave us single beds. Michael was subsequently delighted to get Trevor into monthly magazine work with the BBC, writing about plants. It was one of the many other strands in his career attributable, as the title of the memoir suggests, to chance encounters. Michael adds this. He says, thanks to Chris, I was able to see Trevor at hospice at the very end of his life, as well as being one of the finest field naturalists who have ever lived. To Anna and me, he was the most generous friend who would remember our wedding anniversaries, bring the family to see us for our Boxing Day family gatherings, and sent us Wine Society gift boxes. That's for Michael. Tom Gladwin, another mighty stalwart of the Hertfordshire Natural History Society, also very sorry he can't be here today, and he says, I must apologise with great regret for not being able to attend Trevor James Memorial Conference. At 88, my energy levels are perhaps a little less than hitherto. I met Trevor when he was at Hertford Grammar School, where he was friendly with my brother Alec, who was 13 years younger than me. Together they went birdwatching on Hertford Leads. I have long admired his remarkable commitment to his massive undertakings, together with the depth of his researches and his concern for accuracy. It's worth remembering that when he started work on the flora, he didn't have the computing facilities that we enjoy today. Home desktop computers were still in the very early stages of development. In the event, the first machines were inevitably slow and they had very limited storage capacity. His huge contribution to the fund of knowledge of our county's wildlife will surely be a vital source that will inform conservation strategies for many years to come. As a personal level, I particularly value his contribution to the development and establishment of the Admiral Nature Reserve. In 1987, I had obtained agreement and completed draft plans for the site to be restored to nature conservation. The restoration was planned to be a continuous and integral part of the gravel extraction process. Once the works had started, it was agreed that we needed to establish a small committee with a broader knowledge of natural history than my own. The role of the committee was to monitor the mineral extraction and restoration works and, with the objective of nature conservation in mind, advise the companies as needed. This to be followed by the production and monitoring of a management plan. We particularly needed the botanical skills, and Trevor was the first person we invited to serve on the committee. The remarkable botanical diversity now to be found at Amwell, with over 370 species of plant having been recorded since restoration was completed, is of itself a tribute to his many valued contributions. Above all, I valued his counsel and friendship. I do hope the day will, in every sense, be a successful celebration of Trevor's life and his excellence as a naturalist.
Our next speaker is Graham White. For Graham, who talked about how he worked with Trevor, but as we just heard Tom Blackburn on the creation of the Amwell Nature is very much a lasting legacy for all involved.
Morning everyone. Great to see so many familiar faces. I'm going to struggle. I've got new robot eyes. Does people have those? They're awful. So my story is going to go back to Amwell. In fact, it's going to start in the late 70s. And at that time, I just left university. I was bird watching through the Lee Valley up at Amwell. And at that time, it's all been sand and gravel. We're just starting to excavate gravel pit on what was then a nice floodplain grassland. And I decided to write a stroppy letter to the managing director at St Albans Sand and Gravel and tell him how I thought the site should be restored for the benefit of wildlife. And amazingly, I got a reply. And the next thing I knew, I was on that steering committee that Tom has mentioned, with Trevor, the expert, and Tom, and not to forget him as well. And there we were, as Tom has just explained, steering what was going on at that site. And what was probably the first gravel pit to be restored as a nature reserve, if you like, before it was dug out. It was different in those days. I was the sort of inexperienced idiot in the mud, and Trevor was the knowledgeable, confident person who was steering, and the rest of it is history, if you like, as we mentioned. In those days, Trevor was my ecological mentor. He was brilliant. He was a font of all knowledge, ecological, and it was fantastic to work with him on that site. We undertook loads of surveys, botanical surveys, as just been mentioned by Tom. We assisted with various reintroductions. I remember digging up terms of early marsh orchid from White House Power Station and digging them in at Amwell, which is still there. And we were involved in the reintroduction of otters up at Amwell as well, even though we, I think, both disagreed with actually what was being done. But we went along with it, and again, the rest is history. They have spread out from there. Eventually, I moved on to the Wildlife Trust as conservation manager. And at that time, they had an advisory committee, the conservation committee, and Trevor was on that. And that was fantastic. He was always helpful, sensible, like me, knowledgeable, and he was a great person to have there as a support that you could always ask. We may think of Trevor as a naturalist, that's been mentioned many a time, a species expert, and of course he was. But to me, he was a brilliant all-round ecologist, understanding in depth why particular species were where they were. And he would share that knowledge with him. So I've learned a huge amount from him. And I'm still using that knowledge I learned from Trevor to this very day. Actually, the last time I heard him speak on Beatles in Hertfordshire, and that day I picked up loads of good information. So he was my mentor in those early days. What more can I say? He was fantastic. You know, there was a brain to pick if you had questions, an ear who would listen to you and chat, and a chap who would push you in the right direction ecologically. So fantastic. Thank you.
2001 and 2011, so just a few thoughts that she said to me. A great guy, certainly helped us all in the trust, and I was so fortunate that he was so active in the Record Centre and the county when I arrived and throughout my time there. Good that Hertfordshire had an asset like Trevor and his team. Great for the county, inspired diversity, and great for the first-rate recording setup. And some of his experience contributed much wider than Hertfordshire, including nationally. And just delightful to be with. His enthusiasm was obvious and shared with all, so he's sorely missed. But it's good that the foundations that were established serves the county and wider community and inspire diversity for years to come. And that his team grew with him, so that's students' work. So from my own perspective, I met Trevor first in 1990 when I was working for the Lee Valley Regional Park Authority. I was the conservation manager there. And we met at a place called Silvermead in Broxbourne, which is an area of floodplain grassland, which for the sins of the regional park had been planted up with loads of different horticultural variety of trees and just ruined it. So we met to talk about its restoration back to that useful grassland. And I can still remember, I close my eyes now, and he stood by what he felt was the largest pollarded willow in Hertfordshire, huge specimen alongside the railway line there. And as we were talking about it, he pointed out a heart and dart moth in amongst one of the crevices within the willow there. And yeah, just these things stay with you for such a long time. And I think the fact that we were there and he was advising and guiding sort of sums up Trevor for me, because I think he was probably the most helpful man I've ever come across. You know, he had time for everybody to provide that guidance and advice, and of course his huge ecological knowledge meant that there wasn't much that you couldn't ask him. So I'll come on to it a little bit more, but he became my phone friend essentially in my conservation career. Graham's already mentioned it, just always willing to help. Personally, I joined Hertfordshire Natural History Society committee back in 1996, I think at the invitation of Ken down here at the front. And so between 1996 and when Trevor left us, he was our constant really in that committee and guiding and helping. So we got to know one another very well through those different things. Amwell's been mentioned a great deal today as well. So the nature reserve there, as Graham talked about, was started, but for a long time it was owned by the gravel company, and through the steering group that Graham mentioned was guided. But Hertfordshire Middlesex Wildlife Trust took over, it bought the reserve from Cemex, was the company were there, in 2008. And we took the opportunity to make it a little bit better for people as well as wildlife. So I'm sure most of you being here have visited Trevor's Hide. So we made the decision in 2008 to name the 3 hides at Amwell after Graham, who's here today, Tom Gladwin, who we've heard from as well, and Trevor, because personally I feel it's really good to recognise people while they're still with us, rather than wait until they're gone to do that sort of thing. So I know from talking to Chris, Trevor wasn't overly keen on his hide, but anyway, we were happy to recognise everything that he'd done at Amwell by doing that, and a lot of people have enjoyed that hide, and it's got the business and all sorts of other things for over the years. From my own perspective, I don't think anybody has the encyclopedic knowledge of Hertfordshire that Trevor had. I just cannot believe that you could almost talk about any field anywhere in Hertfordshire and he would know something about that, or would know, what had been recorded in it. And I never caught him out. You could talk about anything. So that's why he was a fantastic phone friend, because you could guarantee that Trevor would be able to give personal knowledge about it. And unlike most of us say, oh, I know something you might know that, Trevor knew it. So just fantastic. So not only was he that wonderful ecologist, knowing about all the different species that might inhabit that particular habitat, but he knew about the landscape, he knew about separate fields, he knew about all the different patches of land. And also he had this wonderful network of relationships as well, so he knew most of those landowners, and indeed gave huge amounts of advice, and Dan's here today and wants to know how much he gave to you over the years. That's fantastic. So he was my fellow friend, and I think it's that will remain with me, that I could always turn to Trevor for a bit of help and guidance and advice on anything to do with Hertfordshire's natural history, and that's just fantastic. And I look at these photos that David put together for us today, the rolling slideshow of Trevor, and I don't know whether you're the same. It's always strange when we lose a loved one or a friend, that they're there and then they're not on there. But I think as far as Trevor's concerned, for me, he is with us. That's why we're all here today, to pay our tributes to him. But his legacy goes on, obviously, through all the books he's written. We've heard about a few of them today, the books are out here. And so, yes, he's gone, but his legacy is very strong, and certainly the love and respect that we will have for him will go on a long time.